2,977 people were killed on September 11th, 2001, and over 8,215 people have died from 9/11 related illness. Many of our faculty members witnessed and were impacted by these events. These are their stories.
How would you describe your day prior to the attacks?
So my day was just like a normal day. I was in high school, so I got up, went to school. I think it was probably happened, I guess it must have been around second or third period when it happened. So the morning had I don't remember what classes I had before that, but it was just a normal day. I didn't think anything else of it.
It's one of those things where it's like people tell you, like, I guess it was, the way I could describe it is like, if you ask somebody where they were, and this I was told this was, where were you the day you heard about the news about President Kennedy getting assassinated? And although many people probably couldn't remember like what they had for breakfast the prior weekend, they knew exactly where they were, exactly the setting they were in when the news came. It's something that just got ingrained in your head. So I could tell you that very similar. I remember September 11th. I was in room 101. It was you couldn't ask for a nicer day. Blue skies, didn't seem like there's a cloud anywhere. Beautiful temperature, cool, a little bit of a breeze. I mean, it was just an ideal day. Definitely not a day you wanted to be inside. One of those days you want to go outside and do something, play golf or something.
Well, it was a new day for me. It was that was my second day here at Albertus Magnus. I was in I had been a New York City firefighter for a little more than 20 years. I was in the process of retiring, and that was my second day here. So I was getting my feet wet, as they say, trying to figure out which way to go here and there.
So I was in sixth grade. So it was just a day like any other. I distinctly remember the classroom I was in, but it was just a normal day.
The attacks happened around 10 to 9 in the morning, I guess. One of them, like the weather's been the last couple of days, except for today. Beautiful, beautiful day out. I worked in the narcotics division. I worked in plain clothes, and the first, and I was on my way to work, and I got radioed to respond to the World Trade Center in uniform, which I did. I had a department car, and myself and all the guys that I worked with responded to the site. The second tower has just about fallen. The first tower was hit. The second tower had just gotten hit, and the second tower was going down. And then we kind of moved in after the second tower went down, and it was just complete. So it went from a beautiful morning to complete bedlam, complete chaos. It was surreal, is what it was. It was surreal. You have planes hitting buildings falling down, the dust, the people's belongings from their desks and stuff were all over the sidewalk. There were people, we were stepping, unfortunately, over people that were passed away.
Where were you when you heard about the attacks?
So I remember I was in AP Euro, and so this, you have to remember this was the early 2000s, so people didn't really have cell phones and things like that. So there was one kid in the class who had this phone. It was called a Sidekick, and it had a little bit of internet access. So he was getting some news, I guess, or something on his phone, and he said something to the class. And I think initially we thought that he was just making this up, because he was also the type of kid who would just kind of say things, and also it's just something you wouldn't think happened. So when we first heard it, we're just no, that's not true.
But I remember being in there, and like any other normal day, we started off, and at the time, I believe, we had in every classroom a television in the top corner behind, almost behind the teacher's desk. We used to do I think it was called Channel 1. I think it was set up for that. some of the TVs could get like a little bit of a signal onto regular television, but nothing that was that great. And I can remember going down to the faculty room. I remember seeing some things on the TV, and when it first started, the first plane, you started to get news a little bit dribs and drabs in, and
In bed. The attacks were not that early in the morning, in the 8 o'clock hour, but I was a senior in college actually at the time. So seniors in college usually tend to sleep in. I didn't have class till I think about 9 o'clock. So I had no clue. It was actually my roommate that knocked on my door and kind of informed me that what was going on.
I thought about that. I was in room 102 teaching a health class. I was teaching health and I was the dean of students, so I had like 2 different hats. And I was in room 102, and Mary Kane was the principal, and she came and opened the door and just told me what was going on.
In school, well, I knew something was going on at school. It wasn't until I got home that the full story came out, but I just remember a sense of something is happening. We don't know what. Obviously I didn't have a cell phone that I could look these things up on, so it wasn't until I walked in the door home from school.
Like I said, surreal. It was like nothing you would never ever think that you would imagine. The buildings would collapse, the planes hit all you could see was the remnants of what was left of the buildings, just piles of construction material, and there was a dust that didn't go away for a month.
What was the initial reaction you had when you heard about the attacks?
Okay, so I think when I officially knew, I'm pretty sure that the principal came over the loudspeaker and made an announcement about it. And I don't fully remember my response, but I think it was almost like sort of not denial, but just it just didn't seem real, that I couldn't really process what was happening. It's I don't know how to say this. I don't know. Obviously I believed him, but it was just right now at that point, it was so abstract that I wasn't.
Yeah, all right. There was obviously an accident, a plane hit a building. We didn't really know the extent of it. And then more and more information came in, and I can remember there was one of the Dominican sisters was Sister Donna was here, and she was across the hall from my room in what we refer to as the book room. And she was doing her, beginning of the year stuff, what she does, and she's all of her textbooks. And I remember that she had the door open, and she had a little mini radio going, listening to the news. And periodically, I'd stick my ear out the door and listen to see what she was listening. And so every so often, she'd pop in and give me some information. When the second plane hit, then it took on a different feel. And then you started getting the rumors of how many were there other planes? Another plane, it's not as many, or where are they? And the concerns about the White House and the Capitol, and obviously the Pentagon, which obviously had its trouble there. But it started to trickle in, and that's when the day changed dramatically. And it was, for me, it was even before the first tower fell, because it was that second plane. Because then I in my head, I was kind of like, we have a problem. And the odds were that you're not going to have 2 planes hit 2 towers right next to each other.
Yes.
It just didn't seem likely. So yeah, my fear was that something bad has gone on, and we're in a different state here. I can remember some of the kids, and it's funny because I see some of these kids periodically, and they have same recollections. And I remember they kind of feed in a way when they can, kids can detect when something's up pretty easily. They did that, and they could tell by my face that something was up. And I said, listen, we've had X, Y, and Z has occurred, and right now I don't have a lot of information for you, but what I can tell you is, put your head down for a second, and say a prayer. We didn't really do much in that class, and what I can recall after that is when the tower started to go, when they went, and then the second one went, and then it really took a different twist, and because then information started to come in, and then you could tell like there was panic, and adults in the building were panicked. I remember terrible, but I remember the school nurse was upstairs. She was Mary Novotny, and she lost a kid. Graduate from here, please. In those attacks, worked for Ken Fitzgerald, if I recall correctly. And it was like, it's hitting home. And then you had some parents show up, they want to get there.
Kind of a lack of understanding at first, after the first plane hit, it was something obviously, and something really bad. The extent to what it really was, though, I think, took a little bit to sink in.
Well, I mean, my initial reaction was she said a plane had hit the World Trade Center. I was on a job when when they had the first attacks. I wasn't working the day tour when it happened, but when I first thought about it, my initial thought was it was probably some small plane that had probably tried to fly between them or something like that. I had no idea I didn't know it was an attack. I figured it was an accident, and I was, you just knew it was going to be bad. At that point, you had no idea.
Definitely disbelief. I remember walking in, and it was kind of shortly after more information had come out, and so my parents didn't really know what was going on, and then we were learning together, and it's surreal is the word I would use.
How did you and those around you respond to the attacks?
Again, it was a ton of emotions, I'd say. Shock, first off, disbelief that something like this could happen. I think, like I said, I was in college, so I was there with I had four roommates, so we were all kind of together, kind of trying to understand this, and there was some fear there as well. We were actually, I went to Catholic University in Washington, D.C., so being in D.C., a couple miles from the Pentagon, once that was hit, it really was, I think fear was a part of that day, all throughout. Like, even when we were told everything was okay, you didn't really know that.
Well, I think in the school building itself, there was a lot going on. I do remember that everybody went directly home. There was no after school activities that day. And like I said, it was new for me, so I didn't even know the whole layout of the school yet. I had been coaching here for 4 or 5 years before I came here full time. So I really didn't know how bad it was till I got home about 2:30 in the afternoon and realized that there was a total recall of all police and fire. And I was on my terminal leave. So I got in the car and drove down.
I was 11 years old, so there was only, so much I think I could comprehend at that point. It was, obviously fear and confusion. And, I think it took a few days before I think anyone could even breathe,
You and anybody who's in school now, weren't alive, really, when this happened. This is 24 years ago. And you're outraged. And also, in the beginning, you didn't really know the facts. Like, you didn't really know. There was all sorts of rumors going around. There were rumors that they hit the Eiffel Tower in Paris, I remember. That they hit the, so everything was based on rumor. Nobody really knew for sure. But one of the things that I always it was a horrible, horrible situation, and I was outraged, and it was, and there's no doubt about that. However, I never saw, and I always bring this up to the students, is the way that the country kind of joined together at this point, to support that. I mean, there was like food, water, equipment for the next year being sent down by these major corporations. On my way to work, after the first, I went home after the second and third day, and on my way, on your way home on the West Side Highway, there were people lined up cheering for you with American flags. There were people cheering for you. You went into work with American flags. It was truly a time of nationalism. I think that I've never seen the country join together and everybody work together. So as bad as it was, and as horrible as it was, and as outrageous as it was, it also gave a good feeling to me as a police officer, and I'm sure to all Americans that were involved on it, and were people from all walks of life that's volunteering their time down there. And the other part was there were people coming down there looking for, they just couldn't identify their loved ones, and they were looking for searching for their loved ones. And it was sad. It was really, then you had to kind of control it because you had to organize a search for everybody. So it was a difficult time, but it was again, with every bad thing, there's some kind of good that comes out of it. And if I could say any good came out of it was the fact that the country kind of joined together and helped each other out during that time. So,
what was it like being at Ground Zero?
Well, there's so many words, I mean, pain is the first one, I think that, initially I went to my old firehouse, 53 and 43, and we got on a bus, went down, all the guys that were presently there. And I think there was, complete, I mean, the New York City Fire Department is such a great organization. I mean, it's an undefeated team. I coach, this is an undefeated team, and I think there was just complete, thought that we were going to go in there and save people, and I think that's what the job has done for hundreds, over 100 years. I don't think the reality of how, that there wasn't going to be rescues didn't set in right away.
For search and recovery for people and anything that we could salvage at that point. But there were firemen and there were cops. There was people from all over and many walks of life. And as the days went on, people from all different industries, like construction industries, to help us dig through the pile, looking for for just kind of any kind of survivors or remnants of people that were still there. But I went down there, and one of the interesting things about it is there was so much going on, and cell phones and internet and cell towers, I guess at the time, couldn't handle it. So I had no telephone communication with my wife. So my wife my family didn't really know where I was, and they knew I went down there, and as did many other people that were involved. So you couldn't really there was no communication for a little while. But I saw there were people that I knew, the firemen that were missing. I saw Coach McFadden down there. I saw Mr. Cooney was down there. A couple of people from our building were first responders down there at 9/11. All right, because after I spent my first 3 days down there, just looking for search and recovery. I slept in a church. There was a church on the corner. I don't know how it was Trinity Church. I don't know how it never got destroyed, but it didn't. And that's where most of us, took a break. And it just and you went from search and recovery. Then you were searching like rooftops of surrounding buildings and things like that. So it didn't stop. And you're on the pile. It was called the pit, and there were firemen and cops, and there was buckets. It was called what they called the bucket brigade, because they were just digging stuff up, and they had a bunch of buckets, and they put the stuff in the buckets, and they pass it out, and they put it on trucks, and they send it out to Staten Island, where they would sift through they're looking to identify people or remnants or DNA or something like that. But it was just. It just was something like I never ever saw before, in my life. and I don't think I'll ever see again, obviously. And and I was with guys that I work with. I mean, these are people that I work with, but I'll get to that later, because there were to this day, in the last year, I lost two very close friends of mine who attributed their deaths to 9/11 cancer. So the stuff that you were breathing in down there, and they didn't really have. They were no way ready for that. They didn't give you the masks that they supplied you with were totally inadequate. It just it was just a total weird situation, a surreal situation, I guess would be the right way.
What did you do following the attacks?
So I'm trying to remember. I think we went through the rest of the school day. Pretty sure we went through the rest of the school day, and then afterwards, probably they sent everyone home. I don't remember if they like canceled after school activities or whatnot. And I remember I had work that day, and I was trying to decide, should I go to work? Should I wait for my sister and drive her home? And like, I just didn't really know what to do. So I tried to pretend it was like sort of a normal day. So I ended up trying and then going to work afterwards.
We went through the school day, and I had gone home, and we were trying to touch base with people that were in the city and whatnot. My father was working in the city, not in that area, downtown by the towers. But he was in the city, and the concern was there's no way to get in touch with him because the phone lines are down. Everything was pretty closed. You couldn't get out. He ended up getting a ride from somebody, went around a different way, and we ended up picking him up. But I can tell you that by the end of after watching countless amounts of coverage on it, at the end of the evening, to me it was like surreal, because you went outside, and again, it's a lovely, lovely day. And you went outside, and there was nothing. It was silent. Like, you didn't really hear an occasional car went by. You didn't really hear any. There was no planes in the air. It was just this very eerie, calm silence. And I recall that vividly. And I think one of the big memories that a lot of people have is just what a beautiful day it was. And then, of course, the tragedy happened. It became a situation of accounting for people. You hear all these stories, and you're making phone calls when phone lines started getting more active, and you're making calls. Is this person accounted for? Is this person accounted for? And I had several friends who were in the city, and I couldn't get in touch with them. I'm talking to their parents, and oh no, this guy he got home, he got back to Hoboken, or this guy got off the train, went right back on the train, went right back into Hoboken, or he got a ride home on the way down. They stopped and came across, and it was really kind of like a checking in on everybody to see how everybody was doing, and to see if they had heard from people, and you were hoping and praying that everyone was accounted for, and sadly that wasn't the case. And then the days following, that's when you got more and more about what had gone on, and the idea of like, did this person make it or not, or whatnot. And you did hear good, a lot of stories of hope when they found certain people in the pile and the rubble, and there are some great miraculous stories that came out of it. But in all honesty, people were kind of like, what are the odds of this happening? It's your odds aren't as good as you think, and I know that. So the campus shut down, obviously, once this all went down. So really, there was not all that much we could do. Following the news as much we could that day in terms of trying to get updates. I remember it being a weird situation for me, because I obviously have a connection here. All my family's here, and I know of relatives and friends that would have been down in that area at the time. So it was really a lot of trying to connect to people. I remember when I finally called my mother
just to see if everybody up there was okay. She got really mad at me because I hadn't called earlier because I was in DC. I wasn't even thinking so much about, what was going on where I was. I was worried more about New York, which was kind of silly. So I remember her being concerned about me not being concerned enough about being in DC at that time. So it was really a day where trying to figure everything out, and obviously a lot of sadness and a lot of hope that people could be saved. Obviously, a lot of people were going to be killed. We knew that, but there really was that sense that the rescue missions in DC and in Manhattan were going to work.
Well, my first week of school, I didn't come here. Well, there was no school, I don't think, for a few days, but I didn't work the first week. I just, went down. First, I was an instructor out at the Rock, so I went to the Rock the first day. Then the next day I went to 43, and, we just went down and worked on the pile that first week. And then, one of the, then the reality set in that many of these wonderful, wonderful people, I knew, you're on the job for 20 years, lots of people. And my dear friend, Freddie Hill, I didn't realize he was going to heaven that day. And, I stopped down to see his wife, Mary, down in Pearl River. And his son, Freddie, was a young firefighter at that time. He had, I think, had maybe a year on the job or something like that. So it was just, it was all a blur. You went there, and next thing you know, you were just going to funerals. It seemed like all the time.
I remember plenty of events that the school had, and just watching things on TV, like trying to get back to normal. Just seeing the kind of the national reaction, and if there was, out of everything, there was at least this sense of community and coming together that even at that age I could tell, but looking back, it was just such a massive change.
So following the attacks as I described, I did everything from traffic control to working on the pile, digging through the pile for survivors, for remnants of survivors. We searched the area, rooftops and things like that for unfortunately body parts or whatever, just to so that it was a whole bunch of things that I did. So I was there, I would say, in and out of 3 or 4 weeks after the attack, and it went on for years. The stuff just kept being sent down to Staten Island, to the landfill there, to kind of sift through, and they're still identifying people. But I worked hand in hand, and as I said, guys that are very, very good, close friends of mine. In the last year, I lost 2 very close friends. So it's it's something I'll never forget. So.
What was the overwhelming feeling you felt that you observed from other people?
So it was just, everyone afterwards was just so, solemn. I remember even, especially, the radio, there was no music on the radio. I forget how long it was, days, maybe even weeks. There was, no music. It was just, coverage of it. I don't remember what it was like the next day when we came into school, but I imagine, it's also hard because you have to remember, as high schoolers, we didn't fully understand what was happening, and it was, so I think in terms of my peers, we probably were going on somewhat normally because we weren't fully understanding what was happening, and I think the teachers did a good job of kind of not pretending nothing was happening, but not making us all feel completely upset. I don't remember if there was any, I'm sure there were students who didn't come in the next day, maybe because they knew someone or anything like that. But it was kind of one of those things where you were just still doing what you had to do. You were going through the motions, doing all the stuff.
That old fear of the unknown and what's next. That I think was something that came up. Of course, the feeling of God forbid, more and more people that did make it that you knew. It was plenty of that. but it was also like, I remember at the end of the day, it was kind of like, what's next now? Like, and I think there was this a general feeling of probably panic amongst people because any little thing that might have gone wrong, which may not have been connected to 9/11 at all, raised alarms. You know, it was like red flag. You know, it was like, you know, you had, for example, any little thing at an airport, you were like, is this another one? Is this happening again? You know, God forbid, you lost power in a storm. You know, why did we lose power? There was this feeling of like, what's next and where were we going, you know, in the world as a country? Like, you know, what was the next step that was going to be taken? And also a lot of questions like, who did it, why, and you know, what was the motivation behind it? You know, as that started to unfold. But I mean, taking a silver lining out of such a day of tragedy was, you know, you saw some of the best in people during that time. You know, it didn't matter who you were, it didn't matter where you lived, none of those things mattered anymore. Those became not even part of the equation. You help people. People help each other. You wish you saw more of that today, but sometimes sadly a tragedy does that. But I remember that. I remember that feeling. Mr. Power, who was down there, and Mr. McFadden, who was down there. I think Mr. Power says it all the time when he talks about 9/11. So it was the worst day in many cases, but it was also one of the best days because you saw something out of people that you don't normally see all the time.
I got to go back to that same word, kind of fear. I'll give you a specific example. Where we were, there were reports throughout the afternoon that another plane was being spotted coming down along the Potomac, which leads right into D.C. And, you know, it wasn't true, but just not knowing at the time and seeing how bad it could get, there was a lot of that fear that, you know, could this be something more than it is? And thankfully it wasn't, but what it was obviously catastrophic. So I think that was a day of a lot of emotions, but fear was one of them.
I mean, it was, obviously, there was incredible pain, incredible loss, the list, the list, I mean, over 343, you started going down the list and said, man, that was so-and-so. I went to Proby school with him. Oh man, I worked with him. I mean, and it continues. I mean, just recently, John McCann from 26 Truck, Tommy McCarthy, Dennis Callipy, all guys that have died of 9/11 cancers. So I say all these people were murdered, and the murders continue.
Confusion and being scared, but it's funny now that I'm a teacher, just thinking like, what would I do in that situation? And the people who were my teachers, who were in the school, my parents, everyone did do a great job at just, making sure I felt safe, and trying their best to explain it in their own words. But it was a tough position to be in, and I know that now more than ever.
It was basically the same. I mean, people didn't understand it in the beginning, right? They didn't really, again, there were rumors and all sorts of guessing as what happened, what else happened, who was responsible for it. So that was the general feeling in total. But the feeling of it was surreal. It was like, you never thought in my time that you'd see a plane fly into a building, especially the World Trade Center. And I'm a city guy. I'm born and raised in the city, and I know. And I worked as a cop for 22 years in the city, so I know all these. I've never ever seen anything like that in my life. So, there was outrage once they finally realized that somebody was responsible for this and did it purposefully. People were outraged. However, again, there was also that good feeling of the nationalistic feeling that kind of came with it as well.
So yeah, after the events of September 11th, it was kind of like a feel to go home, and be with family and friends. And so I went that next weekend, and just coincidentally, that was my first year with a bunch of my buddies. We got Mets season tickets, and I think it was like 10 days later, I think it was, the Mets played the first game back in New York after the events of September 11th. So I went down with a friend, and it was one of the more surreal, I think, experience I've ever had, because you go into the stadium, you're nervous, you're not really sure how you're supposed to act. It's a baseball game, but it's something different at that point. So, you're kind of somber. They had a great pregame event where all of the bagpipers came out, military, NYPD, and FDNY, and all of the other forces that were around helping during this time and who tragically lost people. They were all there. They were present. So it was kind of overwhelming how amazing it was. And the strangest thing for me and my friend as we were there was kind of the shift where you started to say, hey, this is a baseball game, and we can start to enjoy it, and we can watch, and we can root for the Mets. Some people are familiar with how it ended up, but we were playing our big rival, the Braves, and they were a team we always hated, and it was the ninth inning when Mike Piazza hit a home run, and the whole Shea Stadium was rocking, going nuts, and it really was a cool experience to say, like, wow, like, even though we're still mourning, we're back as New Yorkers, and we can still celebrate life while we mourn the ones that we lost and the families that are suffering.
I have complete, I love the job, and I have a lot of respect for people who've taken the job since it. My dear friend Bernie Heron lost his son on the 11th, and two of his sons became firefighters afterwards. I get goosebumps thinking about that. But many, I have, I have a son who's in the FBI. I think anybody who's in law enforcement or a first responder of any sport, any sort, especially in New York City. I mean, there's so many targets. I have the tremendous respect for them, and I do. I pray for their safety. When I got on the fire department, one of the first things that's ingrained into you is that you call one another brother, and I didn't really understand it. It was my first real job, but 20 years later, working on a pile, you saw that brotherhood completely, and I saw it throughout my career. And I think it's something that propels firefighters every day. I think I worry about the firefighters in the city now with all the potential targets and the great job they do, but that brotherhood is what propels you to take chances and to. The benefit of that is the people of New York are tremendously protected by a very dedicated and well-trained fire department, along with the police department and all the emergency service workers. And, that the horrific event of 9/11, it happened at the worst time for the fire department. The change of tours at 9 o'clock in the morning, the firehouse kitchen is like a sacred place. And, there were guys who were off duty who just hopped on the truck because of the brotherhood. So, but many of them are up there.
I guess I always go back to being in the classroom when it happened and how difficult that must have been for my teachers. And now just such a newfound respect for what position they were in. So that's what sticks out to me the most as someone who was in elementary school and as an elementary school teacher, that responsibility you have. So now I think about it from that perspective more than anything else.
That, people, of your age and of your generation really went around for it. And I understand that, it's kind of like me with World War II growing up and things like that. And, but I know for a fact that there are families not only that lost people that day, but families that continue to lose people right up into this time. And that, and that we just keep them in our prayers. And it's a hard thing to accept. And I'd say it's going to go on, for another 20 years. We're losing people to the poisons of 9/11. So, like this cancerous stuff that was floating around down there, and I can't blame the government for not, being prepared. How could you be prepared for that? So it's just, just that everybody remembers the victims of 9/11, and everybody remembers that there are still victims of 9/11, and people are still going through it. So.
Albertus alumni that were killed on 9/11 include Michael McHugh, class of '84, Sean Fagan, class of '85, Brian Novotny, class of '86, Michael Roberts, class of '89, and Kevin Riley, class of '91. Those that died due to 9/11 related illness include Thomas Moran, class of '76, and Kevin Nolan, class of '79.